The hedgerows of Normandy swallowed sound like a sea of thorns. At first light in July 1944, British tankers rolled forward beneath a ceiling of low cloud, engines grumbling, aerials trembling, mud slapping against hull plates. Rumor rode with them. Somewhere ahead, a tiger waited. Men who had fought in Tunisia and Italy had given it a shape in memory. Towering turret, slab armor, a gun that decided battles in a single breath. On training grounds, the Sherman was a dutiful workhorse, quick to start, easy to repair, eager to carry infantry through lanes of dust. Here, hemmed in by bocage embankments, the same machine felt frail, as if speed and optimism could be trapped by Earth itself. The lane narrowed, hedges rose like walls. Every bend became a question with teeth. Reports had warned that frontal duels were suicide. The 75 millimeters of most Shermans cracked harmlessly against the tiger's brow, and even courage could not thicken armor. Yet within the British column, one elongated silhouette betrayed a different promise. The Firefly, its long 17-pounder protruding like a pike from an age of knights. It was a hybrid born of urgency, British gun, American chassis, battlefield mathematics rewritten in steel. If there was any hope of piercing myth and metal, it lay there, in a crew drilled to stalk flanks, to turn distance and angle into survival. Across the fields, the ground began to talk. A low mechanical thunder, distinct from artillery, heavy and deliberate, the signature of a Maybach drawing breath. The lane funneled toward a slight rise. Orchard on one side, ditch on the other, visibility cut to fragments by hedges thick as ramparts. A muzzle flash flared like daylight. A leading Sherman disintegrated beneath the blow. Turret wreathed in black fumes. Shock rippled down the column. The tiger was not guessed, it was proven. The Firefly slid back into shadow, track pins ticking, commander counting hedgerow gaps and field boundaries like a surveyor of danger. Doctrine met geography. A barn gable beyond the rise could hide a lateral view. A drainage run might mask a hull-down angle. The Firefly edged into a field entrance. Turret easing, gun settling along a seam of leaves. The tiger moved again, slow and sovereign. Turret searching, exhaust smearing smoke against apple boughs. It had time, and time was usually enough. The Firefly fired first. The 17-pounder's report broke the lane like a hammer in a cloister. The sabot sped flatter than belief, struck where side plate met engine deck, and turned steel inward like paper. Fire lifted, then billowed. The tiger's motion failed, torque dying into silence. For a breath, the battlefield emptied of certainty. Men who had carried the weight of legend felt it slip from their shoulders and fall into the ditch with the shattered myth. No one mistook this for the end. Hedgerows hid second guns. Lanes fed crossfires. Victory in Normandy came in inches, not in headlines. Yet something irreversible had begun. The Firefly's long barrel cooled in mist. Crews rechecked ranges, regridded orchards, rehearsed the mathematics again. A tiger could be killed. The rest of the day and the campaign would demand that knowledge be paid for, kept, and used. The smoke drifted low over the hedgerows, clinging to the damp air like a ghost that refused to rise. For a long time, no one moved. The Firefly's engine idled softly, its deep thrum almost gentle compared to the roar that had shaken the fields moments earlier. The men inside the tank sat rigid, their bodies humming with the aftermath of battle, their ears ringing. The tiger still burned less than 100 yards away, a smoldering mass of twisted armor and rising flame. Even in death, it looked colossal, a dark monument to German engineering that had ruled Europe's battlefields for years. Around them, the countryside was eerily quiet. Birds had vanished, the air heavy with the stench of burning oil. The Firefly's gun barrel smoked faintly, the heat of the 17-pounder warping the cold air. It had done what few thought possible, destroyed a tiger at range. The British crews who had survived watched from their Shermans further down the lane, some too stunned to cheer, others too cautious to believe it was over. Reports from Normandy had long painted the tiger as unstoppable. Allied shells would bounce harmlessly from its frontal armor, and every encounter left wrecks and fear in its wake. The German propaganda machine had built its myth as much as its steel, a machine of invincibility, slow but divine in precision. Yet now that myth was burning in a French orchard. The Firefly's commander gave the signal to advance. Slowly the column began to move again, treads crunching through mud and crushed branches. They skirted the wreck carefully, the air still trembling from the heat. Through shattered armor, the blackened outlines of ammunition racks and mechanical guts glimmered faintly. There was no triumph in the sight, only grim respect. Even destroyed, the Tiger was magnificent. Its thick steel plates, once unyielding, were now peeled open like bark from a tree. It had taken everything the Firefly could give and still stood proud in ruin. Farther along the road, more hedgerows waited, more traps, more invisible guns. Normandy was not a battlefield of open duels. It was a maze where patience and nerve decided who lived. Every field, every stone wall, hid danger. The Firefly crew knew that their victory would draw attention. The Germans would adapt. Tigers and Panthers would change tactics, hiding deeper, waiting longer, striking faster. The British crews pressed on, fanning out across the patchwork countryside. The Firefly took position at the rear, its long barrel scanning the tree line. The 17-pounder was powerful, but its reload was slow, and its long gun made concealment difficult. It was both a weapon and a beacon, protection and target in equal measure. Still, it was the best chance the Shermans had. As the day wore on, the column moved cautiously through the narrow lanes. The sky cleared, and the late afternoon sun broke through the haze, turning the smoke into thin golden ribbons. Every few minutes, a distant explosion rolled across the fields, the echo of other fights, other tank duels, happening beyond the hedgerows. The war in Normandy was a slow grind, a contest of nerves and steel where each advance was paid for in blood. By evening, they reached the edge of a small village. Houses stood roofless, windows shattered, gardens churned into mud. The Firefly halted near a stone wall, its commander scanning the horizon through his binoculars. Somewhere beyond those ruins, German armor waited. Perhaps another Tiger, perhaps several. The thought hung heavy, but the memory of the morning's kill burned hotter still. For the first time, the British crews felt something more than fear. They felt possibility. The legend of invincibility had cracked. The enemy could bleed. And somewhere beyond the smoke in the fields, deep in the German lines, officers were already reading reports that said the same thing. The Tigers had met their match. Night settled over Normandy like a heavy curtain of smoke and silence. The stars were hidden behind a low ceiling of cloud, and the only light came from the dull orange glow of distant fires, barns, tanks, and villages burning on the horizon. The British tankers rested where they could, their Shermans and Firefly parked in tight formation behind a shattered stone farmhouse. The air reeked of cordite, oil, and damp earth. Somewhere out in the darkness, engines rumbled. German reconnaissance vehicles, maybe, or the restless movement of retreating armor. The Firefly's crew worked by dim lantern light, inspecting their gun and cleaning out the barrel. The 17-pounder's recoil mechanism hissed faintly as frost began to form on the breech. They had fired only a few rounds that day, but each one had counted. The British understood the importance of what had happened. Word spread quickly along the line. A Tiger destroyed by a Sherman variant. It wasn't just a victory, it was a shift in morale. For once, the Predator had bled. In British command tents, farther behind the lines, reports arrived from field observers confirming the kill. Analysts pored over the details: range, angle, ammunition type. The Firefly's armor-piercing shot had struck the Tiger's flank at nearly 800 meters, a perfect combination of precision and luck. For months, British crews had been taught to avoid direct confrontation, to survive through mobility and teamwork rather than brute strength. Now at last they had proof that brains and discipline could triumph over raw power. But the Germans were not ignorant. They too studied every engagement, every burned-out wreck. Field officers soon discovered the longer barrel of the Firefly hidden among standard Shermans and began ordering their men to target any tank with a noticeably extended gun first. The Firefly's greatest strength had also made it a marked target. The British knew this would change the game. The next time they met Tigers, it wouldn't be a one-sided ambush. It would be a duel. By dawn, fog had rolled in thick and low, clinging to the fields like a ghostly tide. The British column stirred to life again. Engines coughing, metal groaning, boots crunching in frost. Orders came to push forward toward the town of Saint-Aignan. Intelligence suggested that elements of the 2nd SS Panzer Division had regrouped there, including several remaining Tigers. The thought tightened every man's chest. The Firefly took its place near the front this time. Its engine rumbled with quiet confidence, the scars of the previous battle still visible on its mudguards. The crew had grown silent, focused. The commander traced the map again and again, memorizing every contour, every hedgerow, every likely ambush site. The approach to Saint-Aignan was narrow, one road threading through open farmland and stone cottages. To the left, a small orchard. To the right, a cluster of haystacks and a drainage ditch deep enough to swallow a tank's tread. The ground was slick from morning dew. The hedgerows loomed high, blocking all sight beyond 30 meters. And then, from somewhere ahead, came a sound like thunder rolling through the mist. The deep, guttural roar of a tank engine larger and heavier than any Sherman's. The column froze. Through the fog, a dark outline began to form, vast and deliberate, moving slowly but without hesitation. A Tiger. Its turret turned, the long barrel glinting faintly in the weak light. The Firefly reversed slightly, slipping into cover behind a farmhouse ruin. Every breath felt loud, every heartbeat counted. The British gunners knew what would happen if they fired too soon. The shot would give them away. But waiting too long meant death. The Tiger rolled forward, unstoppable, its tracks grinding over rubble and dirt. It was searching, probing. The air seemed to vibrate with its power. The Firefly waited unseen, its gun leveled at a narrow opening between two hedgerows. The commander watched through binoculars, his pulse matching the distant rhythm of the German engine. The second duel was about to begin. The morning fog began to thin, revealing the shapes of trees, barns, and low walls, like ghosts solidifying from vapor. The British column had halted, hidden as best they could along the lane. Engines idled softly, radiators ticking. Ahead, beyond a thin curtain of mist, the Tiger crept into view. A mountain of steel gliding with slow, terrifying grace. Its guns swept left and right, pausing with predatory patience at every shadow that might conceal an enemy. The Firefly sat perfectly still behind a ruined farmhouse, its hull half buried in the earth for concealment. The gunner adjusted his elevation, the loader poised with another armor-piercing round. The 17-pounder was a powerful weapon, but it had limits. It could only penetrate the Tiger's side or rear, and the slightest mistaken aim could mean a wasted shot and instant death. The Tiger halted. For a moment it seemed to listen to the silence. The German crew inside, unseen, were professionals. Veterans who had fought on the Eastern Front, where ambushes like this were routine. They knew the sound of engines, the echo of fear. The Tiger's turret began to turn toward the ruins where the Firefly waited, its barrel slicing through the fog like a scythe. The British gunner held his breath. Every instinct screamed to fire, but the angle was wrong, too thick on the front plate. The commander's hand was steady on his shoulder, a silent order. Wait. The Tiger advanced another few meters. The morning sun finally broke through the haze, glinting off its armor. The Firefly's optics caught the gleam, in the thin seam where side met hull. That was the moment. The 17-pounder fired. The blast shattered the stillness, a concussive boom that sent birds scattering from the trees. The shell struck the Tiger's flank, just behind the turret ring. Sparks exploded, steel tore, and a puff of black smoke burst from the engine compartment. The Tiger shuddered but did not fall. Its turret swung toward the Firefly's position, faster now, alive with fury. The British crew reloaded with desperate precision. The loader slammed another round into the breech, the gunner realigned by instinct. The Tiger's gun fired. The shell hit the farmhouse wall inches from the Firefly's front, spraying brick dust and flame. The concussion rocked the tank, deafening the crew, but it held. Before the German could fire again, the Firefly answered. The second shot hit lower, punching through the thinner side armor near the engine deck. A plume of flame erupted, followed by a deep, booming crack as internal ammunition cooked off. The Tiger's engine screamed once, then died. Its turret froze mid-turn. For a moment, there was no sound but the crackling of fire. The air shimmered with heat. The Firefly crew stayed motionless, waiting for a counterattack that never came. When the smoke began to clear, the Tiger was still, a gutted hulk, its might reduced to ruin. The Firefly emerged slowly from behind the wreckage of the farmhouse, its guns sweeping for new threats. The rest of the British column advanced cautiously, eyes fixed on the smoldering enemy giant. Two Tigers destroyed in two engagements. Something that had once seemed impossible was now fact. But there was no celebration. The crew knew better than to mistake luck for victory. Each encounter with a Tiger was a coin toss, and the next could just as easily go the other way. They inspected the wreck, noting how the shots had struck, how small the window of success truly was. The Tiger's armor was not invincible, but it had demanded perfection to defeat. Further down the road, the battle continued. The sound of artillery echoed from Saint-Aignan. Smoke rose again on the horizon, and the radio crackled with new orders. The advance was to continue. The Firefly turned its turret forward once more, the long barrel cutting through the haze like a spear. Its crew had seen the Tiger's death twice now, but they knew there would be more. The war was not done testing them. And somewhere ahead, through the fog of smoke and gunfire, another Maybach engine was already growling to life. By afternoon, the sky over Normandy had turned the color of lead. The clouds hung low, pressing the smoke and dust of battle back toward the earth. The fields were pitted with craters and littered with the carcasses of machines, Shermans, half-tracks, even the charred remains of a panther caught in artillery fire. The Firefly rolled on through the debris, its tracks clattering over broken steel. Each mile forward felt like dragging history uphill. The destruction was everywhere, but so was progress. The Allies were advancing meter by meter, pushing the German lines back through the bocage. Yet the cost was enormous. Every hedgerow, every sunken lane was a fortress. Each one demanded blood. And though the Tiger's aura of invincibility had cracked, it had not vanished. Somewhere ahead, they knew, more waited. The Firefly's engine growled as it climbed a narrow slope overlooking a small valley. Below lay a crossroads village. Nothing more than a few stone houses, a church, and a rail line half buried in rubble. British infantry moved cautiously along the hedges, rifles raised, scanning for snipers. The tankers covered them, the Firefly's guns sweeping across the horizon. Then, from beyond the far tree line, the first shell landed. It struck 50 meters to their right, throwing up a fountain of earth. Seconds later came another, closer this time. The Firefly's commander instantly recognized the pattern. Deliberate ranging fire from an armored gun. He didn't need to see it to know what it was. A Tiger. The sound came next, rolling like thunder across the valley. The British tanks scattered, taking up positions behind the low stone walls. Through binoculars, the Firefly's commander spotted the source. A Tiger on the ridge beyond the village, its massive gun recoiling as it fired again. It was perfectly placed, hull down behind a rise, exposing only its turret. A fortress of steel on higher ground. The first British Sherman to move was hit almost instantly. The shell punched through its frontal armor like paper, sending a column of fire bursting from the hatch. The wreck burned bright against the gray sky. The crew had no chance. The Firefly's driver pulled them into a patch of cover behind the ruins of a farmhouse. The commander calculated the distance. Roughly 900 meters. A difficult shot, but possible. The Tiger had the advantage of height, armor, and concealment. The Firefly had only surprise. The gunner adjusted elevation, aligning the crosshairs on the narrow slit of visible armor. The Tiger fired again, the shock waves shaking the earth. A second Sherman disappeared in smoke. The British infantry hugged the ditches, helpless against the duel unfolding above them. The Firefly fired once. The 17-pounder's recoil rocked the tank, the shells streaking across the valley in a thin white trail. It struck the Tiger's mantlet, a glancing blow. The German turret turned immediately, hunting the shot's origin. The Firefly reversed behind cover, gears grinding. Dust filled the air. Another explosion followed as the Tiger fired. The shell missed by meters, detonating against the farmhouse wall and showering the Firefly with fragments of brick and shrapnel. The crew repositioned, moving laterally through the ruins, seeking a better angle. Every second mattered. The commander spotted an opening through a gap in the wall, lined the sight again, and waited for the Tiger's next move. The German tank fired once more. Too late. The Firefly had already taken aim and loosed its second round. This time, the shot found its mark. The shell struck just below the Tiger's gun mantelet and punched through. A jet of flame burst from the turret ring, followed by thick black smoke. The Tiger did not explode immediately. Instead, it stopped, silent, motionless, before a dull secondary blast lifted its turret slightly from the hull. The massive machine sagged, fire licking through its hatches. Across the valley, the British infantry began to move again, advancing under cover of the Firefly's steady gun. The burned wreck of the Tiger smoldered in the distance, its defeat visible from miles away. For the Firefly crew, there was no time to celebrate. The commander radioed the kill in calmly, his voice flat. Another enemy destroyed, another narrow escape. In the stillness that followed, the crew sat in the dim light of their cabin, faces gray with soot and exhaustion. They knew that for every Tiger they burned, another waited somewhere ahead. But now at least, they no longer feared the monster. They understood it, and understanding was the first step toward victory. The rain came without warning, heavy, cold, unrelenting. It turned the fields of Normandy into a wasteland of mud and smoke. Water pooled in the shell craters, and every road became a river of filth. The tanks sank deep into the mire, their engines straining, treads slipping as they clawed for grip. The British advance slowed to a crawl. The Firefly, coated in grime, its once olive paint hidden beneath layers of brown and gray, trudged along a ruined lane lined with shattered apple trees. Its crew had been fighting for days without rest, nerves stretched thin, hands blistered from heat and steel. The tank's turret bore scars, shallow dents, shrapnel scratches, and the streaks of dried soot from near misses. Yet it still ran, its heart as relentless as the men inside it. They passed through a hamlet that barely existed anymore. Every building was half collapsed, roofs gone, windows blown out. The air smelled of smoke and wet earth. Somewhere in the ruins, a church bell hung twisted from its mount, swaying soundlessly in the wind. War had erased the line between landscape and graveyard. Command's orders were simple, if brutal. Continue the push eastward. Link up with the Canadians near Villers-Bocage. Intelligence warned of German armor regrouping in the woods ahead. Likely panthers, maybe even surviving tigers. The men said nothing when they heard it. They all knew what that meant. The Firefly led the column now. Its long 17-pounder made it the obvious spearhead, capable of outranging almost anything the enemy could field. Yet that strength came at a cost. The extended barrel snagged easily on branches and hedges, and every time the tank turned, it risked revealing its position. Still, it was their best weapon, their only equalizer against the German beasts that had haunted them since D-Day. They reached the edge of a field bordered by thick woods. The rain eased, leaving behind only mist. It was quiet, too quiet. The commander studied the tree line through his binoculars, searching for movement. Every instinct told him they were being watched. Moments later, a flash. Not lightning, muzzle fire. A German shell tore through the fog, slamming into the lead Sherman behind the Firefly. The explosion ripped the tank apart, the blast wave hurling mud across the field. Before the echo faded, another round screamed overhead, narrowly missing. The Firefly lurched forward, finding partial cover behind a sunken embankment. The gunner swung the barrel toward the trees, eyes scanning for the source. The Germans had positioned themselves perfectly, concealed, elevated, with a clear field of fire. Through the shifting mist, dark shapes moved. Panthers. 2 of them, maybe 3. The Firefly fired first. The 17-pounder barked, its shell slicing into the tree line. A bright explosion followed. The first panther caught the hit square on its side, bursting into flames. The others returned fire immediately. The ground convulsed as shells impacted nearby, each explosion louder than the last. Dirt and shrapnel rained down. The gunner worked frantically, reloading, aiming, firing. The Firefly's recoil shook the entire tank, its frame groaning from the strain. The loader's arms were raw, his gloves blackened with oil and sweat. Another panther tried to flank them, its silhouette appearing through the mist. The Firefly pivoted its turret, treads grinding against the mud. The next shot struck true. through the front glasses of the Panther. The German tank halted, then erupted in an inferno of orange and black. The remaining Panther retreated into the trees, firing sporadically as it vanished into the fog. The British held their fire, conserving ammunition, eyes fixed on the shifting gray beyond the field. The rain returned, pattering against the steel hull, hissing where it met the still-hot barrel. When the silence came again, it felt heavy. The kind of silence that came only after violence. Smoke drifted lazily over the battlefield, and the smell of burning fuel filled the air. The Firefly had survived another encounter, but the cost was everywhere. The column behind them was broken, wrecked tanks burning quietly in the rain. The commander looked out across the valley. The road ahead was littered with obstacles, the enemy retreating but never gone. The Firefly's engine idled, steady and strong, a heartbeat in the storm. The men inside said nothing. There was no need. The tank had become their voice, and it spoke with fire. By the seventh day of continuous fighting, the British advance had turned into endurance. The Firefly's armor was streaked with dried mud, its treads worn and scarred, yet it still moved with grim determination through the churned landscape of Normandy. Every mile felt heavier than the last, and every victory came wrapped in exhaustion. The countryside that once bloomed with orchards and golden fields was now a wasteland. Trees lay splintered like matchsticks, craters filled with stagnant rainwater reflected the gray sky, and the air hung thick with the metallic tang of war. Somewhere ahead, beyond the haze, came the unmistakable growl of German armor again. Deep, deliberate, confident. The Firefly's commander studied his map under the dim light filtering through the clouds. Intelligence had placed a retreating German column along a narrow ridge ahead. It was believed to include one Tiger II, the new King Tiger. He had heard the rumors: thicker armor, heavier gun, an evolution of the monster that had already terrorized Europe. The thought tightened his chest. The Firefly had bested tigers before, but the King Tiger was something else entirely. The order came through the radio. Advance cautiously, hold the line until reinforcements arrived. The Firefly took point once more, its 17-pounder facing forward like a lance. They rolled out of the trees and into the open plain, the wind carrying with it the faint smell of diesel and smoke. The ground trembled slightly. Faint vibrations felt more than heard. Then the sound came. A low rumble, mechanical, heavy. The enemy was near. The first shell hit the earth 30 yards to their left, throwing up a geyser of mud. The Firefly's driver instinctively veered right, scanning for cover, but the field was bare, only shallow dips in the skeletons of burned-out vehicles. The commander spotted it then, a massive silhouette on the ridge, half shrouded in mist but unmistakable. The Tiger II. Its long 88mm barrel looked almost endless, its turret moving with measured purpose. The Firefly braced for the inevitable. The German fired. The shell screamed through the air and slammed into the ground short of its mark, spraying shrapnel over the tank's front plate. The blast deafened them, but they were alive. The Firefly's gunner aligned his sight, calculating range, compensating for distance. At 1,000 meters, the odds were thin, but not impossible. The British tank fired. The recoil slammed through the hull, the shot streaking across the field. It struck the King Tiger's upper glacis. Sparks and smoke, but no penetration. The German tank didn't flinch. It simply turned its turret toward the Firefly. The duel had begun. The Firefly reversed, keeping the gun on target. Another shell from the Tiger tore through the ground where it had been seconds before, carving a crater large enough to swallow a man. The British gunner loaded a second round, aimed for the turret ring, the Tiger's one true weak point. He fired again. This time the round hit. The Tiger II halted for a fraction of a second, smoke curling from its turret base. The Firefly fired again, driving the gun to red heat. The third shell struck the side skirt, tearing through to the engine bay. A deep explosion followed, muffled but decisive. Flames licked out through the vents. The King Tiger's turret moved once more, sluggish now, before stopping altogether. The beast stood still, its armor blackened and burning. The British tankers watched through the gun sight, breath frozen in disbelief. They waited, seconds that felt eternal. Then the explosion came. A thunderous crack split the air as ammunition ignited within the Tiger II. The turret lifted from the hull in a violent burst of smoke and fire. The shock wave rattled the Firefly even at distance. Silence fell again, heavy and surreal. The field was a graveyard of giants. For the Firefly's crew, victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like survival. Their tanks smelled of burnt cordite and grease, their arms numb from recoil. The commander looked toward the burning wreck on the ridge and exhaled slowly. The monster had fallen. Again. They moved on after dusk, the glow of the fire fading behind them. The 17-pounder's barrel still smoked, the rain hissing against its heat. The crew said nothing. Words would only weaken what they had seen. In the gray ruins of Normandy, a small British tank had just proven again what determination and precision could achieve where fear once ruled. The legend of the Tiger was dying, not with grand speeches, but with the echo of a single gun that refused to miss. The dawn after the battle came quietly, as if the earth itself hesitated to breathe. Smoke still curled upward from the distant ridge where the Tiger II had burned through the night. The horizon glowed faintly with the color of ash and flame. The Firefly rested beside a shattered stone wall, its crew too weary to sleep, their eyes hollow yet alert. The battlefield around them was littered with the wreckage of machines, German and British alike. Silent reminders of the cost of every mile gained. The rain had passed, leaving the ground soaked and heavy. The Firefly's treads were half buried in mud, its barrel dark with soot. Steam rose faintly from the engine deck as the morning chill met the heat trapped in its metal body. Around them, infantry moved like ghosts through the mist, stepping carefully around shell craters and the remains of barbed wire. The war rolled on, indifferent to the men who fought it. The destruction of the Tiger II had already become a whisper among nearby units. Crews spoke in low tones about the Sherman that killed the king, but the men inside the Firefly felt no pride, only disbelief. They had survived because of timing, distance, and sheer chance. They knew too well that a single misjudged moment could have ended them. In Normandy, victory was often just the absence of death. Orders arrived shortly after sunrise. Push east again. Support the Canadian advance near Falaise. German resistance was growing desperate, and the retreating divisions were fighting like cornered beasts. The Firefly's commander studied the new map. The route wound through dense woodland, narrow lanes, and small ridges. Perfect country for ambushes. The crew performed their usual checks in silence. Ammunition was low. Only a handful of armor-piercing shells remained. Fuel was scarcer still. The gunner cleaned the 17-pounder's breech with mechanical precision, each motion ritualistic. The driver tightened track pins and cleared mud from the suspension. Every man had his task, every motion repeated until it blurred into instinct. By mid-morning, the Firefly led the column again, its engine grumbling steadily. The air was thick with fog, muffling sound, muting color. They moved slowly through the woods, the branches above dripping water onto the steel hull. Somewhere ahead, artillery thudded like a heartbeat, the front shifting, grinding, devouring. The forest broke suddenly into open ground. Ahead lay a shallow valley dotted with haystacks and low stone barns. It seemed peaceful. Too peaceful. The commander scanned with his binoculars, searching for movement. Then faintly a glint, a reflection of metal, low and deliberate. He recognized it instantly. The curve of a turret, the outline of a gun barrel just visible among the haystacks. Not a tiger this time, a panther. Faster, sharper, and every bit as deadly. The Firefly halted. The crew held their breath. The commander whispered the coordinates into his throat mic. The British column fanned out, hulls scraping through the mud as they took cover. The Panther fired first. Its shell whistled past the Firefly and tore into the ground, throwing up a pillar of earth. The Firefly retaliated instantly. One shot, precise, cutting through the distance. The 17-pounder struck the Panther square in the side, ripping through its armor. The German tank lurched, smoke bursting from its rear deck, then settled into silence. The field erupted with fire. More German guns opened from the tree line. Smaller tanks, anti-tank positions, hidden half-tracks. The British returned fire, the Firefly pivoting and firing again and again, its guns' rhythm almost mechanical. The battlefield became a storm of thunder and flame. Through the smoke, shapes moved. A second Panther, emerging fast from behind the barns. Its turret turned toward the Firefly, gun flashing. The shell missed by feet, tearing through the mud. The British tank fired back, the 17-pounder's shot slicing through the turret face. The explosion that followed was instant. The German machine split open in a burst of orange fire. The battle lasted only minutes but felt eternal. When silence finally came, the field was a ruin of twisted steel and black smoke. The Firefly stood in the middle, its gun still smoking, its armor pitted and scarred. The commander climbed out to survey the wrecks. Across the valley, the Panthers burned where they had fallen, their hulls glowing dull red in the fog. The Firefly had survived again. Not through luck this time, but through mastery. As he looked across the carnage, the commander understood the truth that every tank crew eventually learned. There was no such thing as invincible steel, only men who refused to yield. The war was far from over, but the legend of the German supertanks was dying, one burning wreck at a time. The ninth day began beneath a sky of low, gray clouds that seemed to press the world flat. The Firefly moved eastward through the ruins of Normandy, past villages that no longer had names, only smoldering outlines of walls and chimneys. The air smelled of ash, oil, and wet soil, the signature of a front that had consumed everything. The crew said little now. Each had grown quiet, their exhaustion heavy but disciplined. The war had stripped away excitement and replaced it with routine. Survive, advance, repeat. By now, the Firefly was scarred beyond recognition. Its hull bore dents from shrapnel, scorch marks from near misses, and streaks of mud so thick they looked like armor. Yet the tank still moved, its heart steady and loyal. The 17-pounder, long and weathered, hung like a banner of defiance across the landscape. It had survived more duels than anyone could count, against tigers, panthers, and everything between. Each victory had etched itself into the men's minds, but so had every loss. For every burning German wreck they passed, they remembered the Shermans left behind, silent tombs of men they had known by name. They reached a ridgeline overlooking open countryside, the far edge of the Falaise pocket. The German army was collapsing. Smoke columns rose in dozens of places, like the chimneys of a dying empire. Columns of retreating vehicles snaked through the fields below, desperate to escape before the pocket closed completely. It was chaos. Convoys, tanks, and horses all tangled in the retreat. The Firefly's commander scanned through his binoculars and felt both awe and pity. It was the unraveling of an army once feared as unstoppable. Yet even in retreat, the Germans fought with the precision of survivors. In the valley below, several armored shapes moved. Tigers and panthers covering the withdrawal, holding the line for as long as they could. The order came across the radio, engage and cut off the escape route. The Firefly rolled forward, its engine rumbling low and purposeful. The British formation spread out, Shermans fanning across the ridge, their guns leveling down toward the valley. It was a hunter's field now, the perfect ground for the 17-pounder to show its reach. The gunner adjusted his sights, selecting a tiger moving near the tree line. The distance was nearly a kilometer. Wind low, visibility fair. He fired. The shell sliced through the air and struck the tiger's side. A burst of smoke followed, then flame. The crew inside tried to bail out, but another Sherman hit it from the opposite flank, sealing their fate. The Firefly reloaded and fired again, this time at a panther that had turned to face them. The round struck the turret front. Sparks, then a secondary explosion as ammunition ignited. The German tank vanished in a cloud of fire. The men inside the Firefly barely spoke. Each hit, each explosion, was just another note in the terrible rhythm of war. The German counterfire came quickly. Shells slammed into the ridge, tearing through the earth. One Sherman beside the Firefly took a direct hit, its turret thrown skyward. The explosion rocked the entire formation. Dirt and smoke enveloped the Firefly, the shock wave ringing inside the hull like a bell. But the tank held. The gunner steadied his sight once more. Through the haze, he spotted a third target, another tiger, half hidden by trees. The Firefly fired, the recoil jolting through the floor. The shell hit clean, penetrating the lower hull. A plume of black smoke erupted from the tank's vents, and moments later its guns sagged downward, lifeless. By midday, the battle was over. The ridge was silent except for the ticking of hot engines and the low groan of wind over the burned grass. The valley below was littered with wrecks. German armor torn open and burning, Allied tanks smoking quietly on the heights. The pocket was closing. The war in France was nearly decided. The commander climbed from the turret and stood on the Firefly's hull, surveying the destruction. The landscape stretched endlessly. Black soil, gray sky, and the glow of hundreds of fires merging into one long scar across the horizon. He realized then that they had witnessed something few soldiers ever saw: the fall of a myth. The Tigers had come to Normandy as kings of the battlefield. Now they were ruins, their legend buried beneath the mud. The Firefly's gun, forged out of necessity, had become the equalizer, the weapon that turned fear into fight. The men inside the Firefly were too tired to feel triumph. They knew that every step eastward brought new dangers, new fronts, and the same deadly lessons. But for the first time, they no longer felt small in the shadow of German steel. In the fading light, the Firefly's engine rumbled back to life, echoing across the valley like a pulse that refused to fade. The war was not over yet, but the balance had shifted forever. The final push toward the Seine came under skies stained with smoke and fire. By now, the land of Normandy had become a graveyard of armor. Tigers, Panthers, and Shermans lying side by side, their hulks half buried in the mud, silent witnesses to the storm that had passed. The Firefly, scarred and weary, crawled forward with the rest of the Allied advance. Its once olive paint was dulled by dust and grime, its barrel blackened from hundreds of rounds. Yet it still moved, still fought, still lived. The German lines had shattered. What remained of their armored divisions was retreating east, abandoning vehicles for lack of fuel. In towns and villages, the white flags of surrender appeared like fragile flowers after a long winter. But the British tankers knew better than to relax. A desperate enemy could be most dangerous in defeat. As the Firefly's column approached a crossroads near the village of El Boeuf, they saw the proof. A single Tiger tank, left behind by its retreating crew, blocked the road. Its massive frame stood silent and imposing in the gray light, its gun angled skyward as if defying the heavens. The crew of the Firefly halted, watching it through the drifting smoke. The Tiger seemed to sleep, until its engine coughed once, twice, then roared to life. The sound was unmistakable. Deep, thunderous, mechanical power. It was the last Tiger of the road, and it wasn't done fighting. The Firefly's commander gave the signal to spread out. The other Shermans fanned into cover, their guns trained on the German monster. The Tiger's turret turned slowly, deliberately, seeking its prey. The Firefly moved into position behind a hedgerow. The gunner adjusted his sight, hands steady despite the exhaustion. Through the scope, the Tiger loomed like a fortress, beautiful, terrible, unstoppable. The gunner knew he had one shot before the Tiger found them. The Tiger fired first. The shell streaked past, missing by inches, the shock wave shaking leaves from the trees. The Firefly didn't hesitate. The 17-pounder barked, its muzzle flash lighting the hedge in a burst of orange. The shell hit just beneath the Tiger's turret. Sparks and smoke erupted. Not a kill, but close. The Firefly reversed, mud flying from its treads. The Tiger adjusted, its gun turning toward them again. Time slowed. The Firefly's gunner chambered another round, aimed for the lower glasses, and fired. The shell struck true. A burst of flame poured from the Tiger's exhaust. Its engine roared, then choked, then died. For a moment it sat motionless, black smoke spilling into the morning air. Then came the explosion, sudden, violent, final. The Tiger's hull lifted slightly before slamming back to the earth, its turret wrenched from its mount. The last echo rolled across the countryside like distant thunder. Silence followed. The Firefly's crew stayed still for a long time, the ringing in their ears fading into quiet. Across the field, the wreck of the Tiger burned like a monument to the end of an era. As the sun broke through the clouds, the commander climbed out of the hatch and stood on the turret. The wind carried the smell of smoke and metal, but also something faintly clean, the scent of rain and soil. It was the smell of survival. In the distance, he could see other columns advancing, endless lines of armor and trucks stretching toward the horizon. The tide of war had turned irrevocably. The tanks that once seemed invincible now lay broken. The legends of German engineering undone by relentless endurance, by innovation, by the sheer will of men who refused to give up. The Firefly had been built from necessity, an adaptation, a gamble, a desperate answer to overwhelming odds. Yet it had endured. Its long barrel, its precision, its speed, all born from fear, had rewritten the balance of power. It had faced the tigers head-on and survived, and in doing so, it had helped pave the road to victory. As the British tankers rolled forward once more, the fields behind them smoldered, and the ghosts of fallen machines faded into the mist. The war would go on for months yet, but its ending was already written, not by the mightiest tanks, but by those who learned, adapted, and never stopped fighting. The Firefly's engine growled as it climbed the next ridge, the world stretching before it in gray light. To the men inside, it was more than a tank. It was proof that even in a world of steel and fire, the courage to keep moving could change the course of history. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more World War II stories.